So today we're going to focus on how to use fronted adverbials in our writing. Fronted adverbials are really important when you're writing descriptively because they can make your writing a lot more interesting, more powerful, more detailed. And by starting sentences with fronted adverbials, you make your writing seem a lot more sophisticated. But before we think about what a fronted adverbial is, we need to think about what an adverb is. So an adverb is a word that describes a verb. A verb is a doing or a being word, an action, something that's being done. Remember, every single sentence must have a verb in it in order to be a full sentence. And a fronted adverbial is just a word or a group of words that comes at the front of your sentence that acts as an adverb that describes the verb in some way. So an adverb might be any word that describes how you do something, like carefully, quickly, happily. Most adverbs end in ly. Not all of them. There are exceptions, like fast. Fast is an adjective and an adverb, but even when it's an adverb, it still doesn't end in ly. We don't say fastly, we just say fast. But adverbs describe verbs, describe how we do something. When we put an adverb at the very front of our sentence, it becomes a fronted adverbial. But that's not the only type of fronted adverbials we can have. So we'll come on to that in more detail later. So basically then, an adverbial phrase is just a group of words that describes the verb. And a fronted adverbial is one of those adverbial phrases that comes at the front of your sentence. You can have adverbial phrases anywhere in your sentence, in the morning, at night, under the bed. They're all adverbial phrases that give us information about the verb. If we put them at the front of our sentence, they are a fronted adverbial. So here's a sentence. As quick as a flash, Mr. Palmer's raced down the stairs. I want you to have a think, which part of that sentence is the fronted adverbial? I'll give you a clue. The fronted adverbial tells us how Mr. Palmer's raced down the stairs. As quick as a flash. As quick as a flash, it's an adverb or an adverbial phrase because it's words together acting as an adverb describing how Mr. Palmer's raced down the stairs. And it's a fronted adverbial because it comes at the front of the sentence. When we put a fronted adverbial at the front of the sentence, we follow it with a comma. So, what is an adverb? An adverb is a word that describes a verb, describes how we do something. They usually end in ly. If we've got a group of words that describes the verb, that is an adverbial phrase. And if that adverbial phrase comes at the front of our sentence, then it is a fronted adverbial. So an adverb could be a word like angrily, happily, carefully, quietly. An adverbial phrase, a group of words that act as an adverb. So with great care. If we put that at the front of our sentence, then it's a fronted adverbial. With great care, I planted the seed. Have a look here. Here's another sentence. Early one morning, a troll was born. Where is the fronted adverbial here? It's early one morning. What punctuation mark follows the fronted adverbial? It's a comma. And what type of fronted adverbial is it? Does it tell us where, when, how, or why the verb happened? Well, early one morning tells us when the troll was born. If I said, when was the troll born? The answer would be early one morning. So that is a when fronted adverbial. Here we've got some more example sentences. And the purple the bit in purple, is the fronted adverbial. Have a look, see if you can work out what type of fronted adverbial I've used in each sentence. Carefully, I jumped across the stepping stones. Early one morning, a troll was born. At the end of my street, there is a small shed. So carefully, that's a how fronted adverbial. It tells us how we did the verb. How did we jump across the stepping stones? Carefully. When I put that adverb at the front of my sentence, I'm using a how fronted adverbial. Early one morning, that was the one I gave you before. It tells us when. And at the end of my street, that tells us where. Where is there a small shed? At the end of my street. So that's a where fronted adverbial. A fronted adverbial can just be one word, like here. It can just be an adverb that's put at the front, in which case it will usually be a how fronted adverbial. Remember, how fronted adverbials usually end in ly, because adverbs usually end in ly. Can you think of any other adverbs that we could use here instead? So instead of using carefully as our fronted adverbial, can you think of any other adverbs we could put there? We could have quickly, I jumped across the stepping stones. We could have carelessly, I jumped across the stepping stones. Frantically, happily. A fronted adverbial can be a phrase, it can be a group of words. And remember, they tell us how, where, when, or why the verb happened. Here I've got a little story for you, and there are some fronted adverbials throughout the story. See if you can spot them. I'll read the story to you, and then pause the video after I'm done and see if you can work out where all the fronted adverbials are. Late one night, Mr. Palmer's lay awake listening to the sound of the rain. He couldn't sleep. It was the third night in a row that he hadn't had a wink of rest. Feeling cold, he slipped out of bed to close the window. Shivering, he pulled on a dressing gown and peeled open the curtain. Immediately, he spotted something startling. Heart racing, he sprinted down the stairs and flung open the door. Across the field, something was racing towards him. Something large, something dark and silvery. "Where have you been?" Mr. Palmer exclaimed, as his missing dog bolted straight into his arms. Quickly his tail beat from side to side as he licked his master's face. He was so happy to be home after 3 nights away. So the fronted adverbials are in purple here. Late one night, feeling cold, shivering, immediately, across the fields, quickly. Oh, also there's another one there, heart racing. Have a look at these sentences. You can pause the video, see if you can find all the fronted adverbials in these sentences. Okay, so the fronted adverbials are here. We need to follow them with a comma. Remember, when you have a fronted adverbial at the front of your sentence, you follow them with a comma. And if we were to go through what type of fronted adverbial each one was, every day, that tells us when, or how often even. When or how often does my grandma pick me up from school? Every day. Suddenly, that tells us how. How did the school bell ring? Suddenly. Nastily, that tells us how something was done. Remember, the ones that end in ly usually are how fronted adverbials. Behind my bed, that tells us where. Where did the dark shadow appear? Behind my bed. Before I go to sleep, that tells us when. When do I brush my teeth? Before I go to sleep. Because she loved the dark, that's a why fronted adverbial. It tells us why the bear lived in a cave. Around the gardens, that is a where fronted adverbial. It tells us where the princess loved to stroll. Have a look here now. You can pause the video again. See if you can think of a fronted adverbial to go at the front of these sentences. So something, the dragon prowled around his den. Something, Nadia ate her food. You could have a where fronted adverbial for how did the dragon prowl around his den? Maybe restlessly. Restlessly, the dragon prowled around his den. Or you could have a when fronted adverbial. At night. At night, the dragon prowled around his den. When did he prowl around his den? At night. You could have a why fronted adverbial. Because he was hungry, the dragon prowled around his den. Why did he do that? Because he was hungry. Or you could have a, which one did we not do? A when, we did how, why, where, I think, where might not have done. A where fronted adverbial, up on the mountain. Up on the mountain, the dragon prowled around his den. Where did the dragon prowl? Up on the mountain. Also, you could just move that prepositional phrase at the end, around his den, to the front. Around his den, the dragon prowled. Then you'd be using that as a fronted adverbial. And it would be a where one. It would tell us where the dragon prowled. See if you can think of some of your own for the bottom sentence, telling us how, where, when, or why Nadia ate her food. Okay, here's another little task for you. See if you can add a fronted adverbial onto each of these sentences. Pause the video whilst you do it. Try and make sure you use a range of where, when, how, and why fronted adverbials. Or if you really want to challenge yourself, see if you can think of a where, when, how, or why fronted adverbial for each sentence. Here are some different examples of different types of fronted adverbials. We've got some how fronted adverbials, where fronted adverbials, when fronted adverbials, and why fronted adverbials. If you use a simile, you could use a simile as well as a fronted adverbial, like as quick as a flash. They will usually tell us how the verb happened. And here's your final little task for today's lesson. I want you to go away and write a description of this setting using as many fronted adverbials to start your sentences as you can. So tell me where everything is. Tell me how it is positioned. Tell me why it is there. Tell me when you are in this place and what you can see. So yeah, have a little go at that. Hope that's helpful and that you managed to use powerful fronted adverbials in your writing.